Good evening, everybody. It is the first Thursday of 2021, and we are going to have an exceptional Facebook Live with you today that is going to be so informative to many communities and many common concerns about law enforcement and what to do. So we are going to wait in just a few minutes after I give you guys some updates, and then let you know who our wonderful guest is and bring him on to share his knowledge on criminal defense, what your rights are, what you can do to best protect yourself and your interests. So this is going to be a really informative live. So some quick the explanation is that it's going to have, in my opinion, an expert in criminal defense, attorney Rajan Joshi. But before we bring him on, I'm going to talk about some quick updates. Of course, we have received numerous calls about DACA and immigration reform. Right now, there is nothing officially passed. So we are keeping a list for clients to be aware of any changes that come. So if you would like to be added to this list, feel free to leave your email in our message box or to contact the office. And as soon as any reform or any official changes happen, either for Venezuelans or DACA and Dreamers, we promise to update you all as soon as possible. So as you know, it's our tradition to start the Facebook Live with some good news. On Tuesday, I was at USCIS Orlando, and we had 3 naturalization interviews at the same time. All 3 passed, 2 were sworn in. So welcome to my new fellow Americans on this wonderful privilege and opportunity. We do have a monthly newsletter as well. So please subscribe to our newsletter and our YouTube channel. We send these updates all the time. And just a quick update on personal injury. We had a trial pushed from March to June. They are not doing jury trials yet at the courthouse. And there is an interesting bill that we're watching in the Florida Senate that was passed regarding the bodily injury coverage, requiring minimum $25,000 coverage. So this is just a quick update. So now I want to talk about our wonderful guest for tonight. As I mentioned to you all, he is an expert, in my opinion, in criminal defense law. He graduated from the University of Florida in 2000. And not only did he graduate and pass his exam, but he was one of the top 5 test takers in this whole state of Florida. I mean, there's thousands of people taking a test. Usually 30% will fail, but he has been the top 5. So he is also a nerd, but he's also extremely fit and knowledgeable. And he's actually my former partner. When I was working at Nijam Law, even as an intern, Rajan was there, and he was one of the rock stars of the criminal defense firm. You've seen Rajan Joshi on CNN, Dr. Phil, Nancy Grace, because he represents people in high-profile cases, and he gets them off. And his bio is extremely impressive, and there's some other items I would like to mention very quickly. One, for example, in 2003, when he was a prosecutor, he got an award for prosecuting more trials than any other prosecutor in his office. So when you have somebody who represents individuals on both sides, the state for prosecuting and then criminal defense, this is a wealth of knowledge that most criminal defense attorneys cannot provide with you. So I send him clients, friends, family, because I do trust this person with their lives, and that's how serious criminal defense is. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mr. Attorney Rajan Joshi. Hey, Rajan, how are you?
Thank you, Naif. I'm doing good. I'm very humbled by the introduction you gave. Thank you so much. On the show.
There's a couple other pages, but I just couldn't, get to it in time. But those are, I thought, very interesting. So I know you're on my humble show, but how was being on Dr. Phil and Nancy Grace?
Really interesting. I mean, I was on Dr. Phil, actually. I was aired on Nancy Grace, but not a guest on there. But it was really interesting. It was a really, a case that I took very serious. And, we got a good result. And it was nice being in LA for a few days. So,
well, you did great. I've seen that. And I'm sure you did outstanding for your clients as you always do. So we're getting questions already about people asking me about immigration. I just want to address it. Tonight's focus on the Facebook Live is about knowing your rights and criminal defense. Rajan Joshi is an attorney in Orlando, and he's represent people throughout the state and even out of state for federal crimes. So we're going to talk about what to expect and certain questions that you all have sent us regarding criminal defense and sometimes the overlap with immigration. Tonight, I'm not talking about embassies or any other reform. You can wait for that Facebook Live for the immigration updates. So Rajan, first things first, tell me, at what point do you think an individual needs a criminal defense attorney? A lot of times there's not a simple arrest, but sometimes there's an investigation happening or smoke that one is concerned about. When do you think is the best time for an individual to seek help in the criminal defense world?
Anytime a person is being suspected of a crime, regardless of how small it is important to get an experienced criminal defense attorney at that point. The state has investigators, they have law enforcement, they got prosecutors, they've got all the resources. And the only person who stands in between a person from, going to jail, being arrested, or being convicted of a crime is a criminal defense attorney. And the faster you get someone on board, the better. There's been many cases. I have murder cases where the suspect's never been arrested because, as attorneys, we sandblock the investigators from being able to talk to our clients or being able to search certain areas and stuff. And as soon as someone's arrested, right there, that's the trigger right there. They should get the most experienced, the best defense attorney they can.
So prior to the arrests, you mentioned that there's investigations that happen. A lot of times I hear, especially in the Middle Eastern or Muslim community or immigrant community, I have nothing to hide. I want to cooperate. The police came to my house. Should I talk to them or should I not talk to them for a voluntary questioning? Or, it sounds like we are preventing them, the law enforcement, from doing their job. But why do you think it's important for an individual to not do it alone, at least? So tell us a little bit about this, like data mining or voluntary questionings that can sometimes get people in trouble.
There's kind of a presumption that if you cooperate, things are going to turn out good. But a lot of times law enforcement, they've already got an agenda made up. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the person to make statements that corroborate their foregone conclusion. So a lot of times the best thing to do is to get a defense attorney, because that'll back away law enforcement, because they know they can't talk to a suspect without their attorney present. And the attorney is going to advise the client what not to say. And most times I would advise the client not to talk. If they're investigating and they've already have someone as a suspect, the best thing to do is to say, I'm not talking without an attorney, get an attorney. The attorney will tell the law enforcement that my client's not going to cooperate or make any statements unless you can show me what you got and that they're not going to be arrested. And that gives kind of a protection, a halo on
right.
the client.
And I think a lot of people feel like, well, you said there's a presumption that if I speak with law enforcement, I'll be okay and I'll cooperate. And maybe you will, but why not have an expert, somebody with you who can guide you through something that you may not be used to, right? There's
Exactly.
As you mentioned, they have investigators, they have all the resources in the world. Who is going to be guiding you through your interest? And just like it's the right to have too. So why not exercise your right to have counsel present at minimum?
And the other thing is, law enforcement will twist and turn a person's statements. A lot of times federal agents don't record statements. And we've seen that happen in the past, where their statements are twisted and turned in court, and eventually the truth comes out. And the person who's being accused, was not guilty of what they were originally charged for.
Okay. You mentioned that, typically once an arrest happens, that's obviously a trigger point as to when things get started. Can you give us like a timeline on what happens next? So somebody's been arrested. They either probably, if they've been detained, need to get a bond. Then how soon does a trial happen? What is expected in the law and speedy trial, and just give us an idea on for those who are listening for the first time and have not gone through this process?
Well, usually when there's an arrest, the prosecutor has to make a decision on what charges to file, if any. And a lot of times, that's the time when the criminal defense attorney can, get in there and say, "Look, the guy's charged with robbery, but in reality, it's just a theft. He just stole, this item, and he didn't use any force." So the prosecutor makes the charging decision. Then there's what's called an arraignment. That's the first court date where the person pleads guilty or not guilty. And usually the defense attorney will take care of that. Then there's pre-trials. In the state case, what I do is I conduct depositions in almost all my felony cases. And eventually the case will be set for trial. Most cases don't go to trial because, a lot of times they are resolved or hopefully dismissed before trial. It just depends on the situation.
So explain really quick for me. You mentioned there's sometimes what there's called a plea, and then there's trial. Can you give us a quick dumbed down version of a plea and the trial, and when one should consider accepting a plea or risking and going to trial?
Well, basically, myself speaking, when I'm representing a client, I don't negotiate right away. I like to negotiate from a position of strength. And that means, doing my own investigation, doing the depositions, being able to question the witnesses, come up with, strategized defenses. And then usually at that point, the other side is going to be more reasonable because they have something to lose. Or if they see that the attorney's being aggressive and, ready to fight, the best kind of war to win is the one you don't have to fight in the first place. So usually most cases resolve in pleas, but I don't go fishing for pleas. I want to make sure that I'm controlling the tempo. Now, as far as a trial, when I was younger, like you indicated, I tried the most cases as a prosecutor. I used to love to go to trial. I mean, it was like, that's why I became a lawyer, to get in court, to fight for whatever side I'm on. But now I have to look at what's in the client's best interest, no matter what, no matter if I've won, the last 10 DUI trials, I got to look at what this client's looking at and what they want. And so what I do is I leave it up to the client, basically, go through the risks, the reward benefits, which, you win a trial, it's over. So, but I'd say about 90% of cases, get resolved with a plea.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times you have to have hard conversations with your client.
Yes.
And like, this is the evidence they have against you, right? We've done discovery, we've done depositions, and the state still has a reasonable case that may be interpreted by a jury. And so really, a lot of times people don't want to accept it, but in their best interest for the long term, a plea might be in their best interest, even though it might not be a full dismissal. In the state of Florida, we have what's called withhold adjudication. Can you tell us what that means for the state of Florida and the individual who is going through a criminal proceeding?
A withhold of adjudication is basically, there's not a formal finding of guilt. And, where that really makes a difference is in a lot of cases where there is a withhold of adjudication, eventually, the client can get their records sealed if they've never gotten anything sealed or expunged before. And it's not one of the crimes that is prohibited. But, as far as for immigration purposes, it doesn't make a difference, and what happens is criminal defense attorneys will say, well, it's not a conviction, and it's not a conviction for criminal cases, but as far as immigration, as of course is it can count as far as conviction, and it can lead to deportation in a lot.
Right. I've seen this too many times where somebody comes to me and they say, well, I wasn't convicted. So what do you mean? I wasn't convicted. Oh, I have a withhold of adjudication. Well, for immigration, under the federal law and INA, at least, the Immigration Nationality Act, that is a conviction. So if you're going to become a citizen, for example, and you have a petty theft that was withhold adjudication within the 5-year period of your filing, then this would definitely count as a conviction and you would be ineligible for citizenship. So I feel like some criminal defense attorneys, they get it. They get when somebody's not a U.S. citizen. So what do you know about dealing with foreign nationals who are U.S. citizens? What are things that people need to look out for I guess I'm quizzing you. I know, but you tell me what do you know if you're representing foreigners that are not citizens? What is the best way you can represent
I,
these people?
I personally, have a background in immigration law. So, and, I studied immigration law in law school. So I'm aware of, the different sections between, different non-citizens who are inadmissible versus ones who are removable. And what I do is, this is one area of law where I humble myself and I will refer them to an expert, no matter what. If there's a plea on the table and I've gone to you, you're my go-to guy because you understand this area. When we were partners, I'd ask you questions, and you'd always find the solution best for the client. And I remember you've had people stay in this country, which under normal circumstances, had they gone a different road, they would have been deported. So what I do is, I give my best assessment, but I always rely on an expert. I rely on somebody who deals in this area because immigration law changes all the time. I mean, the regulations change and the interpretations from the,
And it even
BIAs.
changes from state to state. So
Yes.
how immigration determines, let's say something is a crime involving moral turpitude, they look at the language in the statute. So what might be, a battery in California might be a CIMT but it's not so in Florida. So it is very nuanced. And just like myself, I would not represent anybody in a criminal defense proceeding because just like immigration, this is somebody's livelihood and their whole life that's at risk in these situations. So when somebody, I have a question up to what makes you deportable, but I want to ask you something else first. Just your advice in general. What do you tell clients to look for when they're looking to hire an attorney? Like personally, I tell people, I'm going to be your attorney for a year or two, sometimes more. You should consult with other attorneys to make sure you're comfortable with who you want to be with, because this is somebody you're going to be working hand in hand with. What is something that you think people should look out for when they are seeking representation and trying to vet who that might there be their next attorney?
Well, for criminal defense, the most important thing is knowing an attorney that's been to trial, and what type of cases they've tried, because the prosecutors know that, knowing, has the person tried a murder case, how many cases, what percentage of cases they win. Another thing you want to look at is, it's not just a trial attorney, but you got to have an attorney who's diplomatic and can negotiate too. An attorney with, with contacts, personality. You also want to look at someone who's, knows the law. That's really important, because you can have somebody who, may be the best speaker, but isn't fluent in the law and experience. I mean, both you and I are very experienced, and I've been doing this going on 21 years now. Makes me feel old, but we learn from the cases and
Yeah.
knowing the background. A criminal defense attorney, you want to get someone who is a prosecutor or who has a background, like both of us come from a very large, reputable law firm where we learned a lot from very experienced attorneys. It just makes their attorney that much better, I think.
I think you should also have an attorney who's willing to bounce ideas with another individual and
Exactly.
not believing that they are the end all and know of every decision, but to be self-aware and the humbleness, as you mentioned earlier, to let me reach out to an expert in this field to find out. So we did get some other questions, and I want to shift from immigration to some general criminal defense questions. Okay, DUIs, driving under the influence, drunk driving. Don't do it, people. There's already people texting and driving. Roads are dangerous, but I get asked all the time, do you blow? Do you not blow? Is that some advice you can give to people if, God forbid, they're pulled over for DUIs?
Yes, and I've handled I don't know how many DUIs. I can't even count. I tried like 6 before I even finished law school as a prosecutor. For DUIs, when I was a prosecutor, the hardest DUIs to prove for me were the people who didn't talk to the officers, said very little except for here's my license and all that stuff. Did not do the roadside field sobriety exercises and didn't blow. Because then all you're stuck with is the officer saying, oh, their eyes were bloodshot and watery, which could be due to fatigue, due to many reasons. They had an odor of alcohol on their alcoholic beverage on their breath, which, you can't tell what a person drank, how much a person drank, if a person's drunk from an odor alone. And they have very little evidence. But when somebody blows, then you've got this number right here that they're trying to quantify. This is how high their breath or blood alcohol level was. And we got to fight that. We got to try and keep that out, or we got to try and explain it. Now, if somebody's ever refused before, the second time they refuse is a crime. So that's one thing that we've got to, always keep in mind, but if it's the first time DUI and, they know that they're under the influence. Now, I don't drink. I haven't drank in almost 5 years. So I would blow all day long. I'd get blood. I'd do whatever they
But
want.
there's some consequences for not blowing,
There's
right?
consequences, yes. You lose your license for a year, but if you blow over a .08, you're going to lose your license for 6 months anyways. Most situations, if it's your first time, you're entitled to a hardship license. And also, they say it's going to be used against you in a court of law